Well, welcome back to The Pew, everybody. I'm your host, John Edwards. I'm excited to have another week of Just a Guy in the Pew here with you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. This week, we got another treat. My buddy Paul George is still in town, and so we decided to take advantage of the time together and to do another show. So, folks, today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. If you don't know who Paul George is, he is the founder of The Art of Living. He's the author of several books, Rethink Happiness and Holy Grit. You guys should check those out if you hadn't yet. They are great helps to a lot of men. A lot of men's groups use them out there for their formation. So check that out. Paul is also working with me alongside the JP2 Healing Center and doing healing conferences for men. So if you didn't catch the last show with Paul, check that out to find out more about that. But Paul, it's great to still have you here, and thanks for being willing to do another show.
Bro, how fun has it been just to hang out in Memphis?
I know.
Eat some good food.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know, just be together. It's been really good.
It has, man. It has. I was trying to bulk you up, man. You look too skinny for me, man. You're too in shape. I'm trying to put like an overhang on the front.
No, man, I'm getting old, man. You know, it's like, I don't know. I got to take care of myself in some ways, but it's been great. Like, we've been like planning these conferences and kind of diving in. But I think like if you were to like pull the curtain back, what's really been happening is you and I just been sharing our life story together and spending time together, and that's what's been really, really cool.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, man. I mean, it's the same thing we talk about why men need men and why men need groups and why men need to have real, authentic friendships and relationships, right? I mean, this is the first time we've really been in person together other than, a chance meeting in the airport.
Yeah.
And, I've told you more about myself in the last day and a half than a lot of people that at one point in my life would have never known those things about me.
Yeah.
And that's what's great when you're in this place where you're healing and where you're growing and you see a brother in the Lord that is also on the same journey, and it's a safe place to be able to talk and to grow in relationship with one another.
Yeah, I mean, the greatest part of today, like, honestly, is like, this morning we were together. It's like, how can we pray for each other? Yeah. A lot of times men are like, what do you do? I mean, sometimes,
how much do you bench?
You can fellowship and have fun. And a lot of your men's groups, you kind of create these different, nights and experiences, right? But just to be able to share and pray for each other is like, how can I pray for you and vice versa? And we just spent time praying for each other.
Yeah.
Like honest prayer. Like, here's how I really need prayer in my life. And a lot of what we had talked about and prayed for each other for was just really around our role as husbands and fathers.
Yeah.
Right?
Amen.
Like, when you were sharing like what you needed prayer for and I was sharing what I needed prayer for, it really revolved around our vocation.
Yeah.
As a husband and father, the worry, the stress, the anxiety that sort of circles that vocation.
Yeah.
And the constant battle that we feel like, and I'm sure all men feel like that they're fighting each day.
Sure.
Right? Like, how do I love my wife and kids well? How do I provide? How do I work? Like, all these things, it's just this constant, sort of, I don't know, a lot of times it feels like very heavy.
Yeah.
Worry and stress and anxiety around it.
It is. I mean, a lot of us have been raised to be a man means to be perfect, right? Like in these ideals we have, like, I've got to please my coach. I've got to please my dad. I've got to have my wife, and kids can never know that I'm human, right? Like, they can never see that I worry or stress or that things aren't always okay. And that's exactly where the enemy wants you, because then you start to isolate, you start to keep things to yourself. You don't tell friends or anybody, and you're in this constant hamster wheel for perfection. Right. And you never wind up anywhere, right? You're just running in the same space, and nothing ever gets better, right? Like, because you're in that mindset, and it's a mindset that's very destructive, especially when men are trying to go it alone.
Right. And I often think, like, what if the hardest things that you do in your life are the exact things that God wants you to be doing in your life? Like, I'll give you an example. So if you were to ask me today, what's the hardest things you've ever done in your life? Okay. Now, I can list a lot of things, okay? And go all the way back to, high school and college and all these things that maybe I did well at or succeeded at, or college sports, whatever. But if you say, what is the hardest things you've ever done in your life? And I say there are two things that have been the hardest things. And those two hardest things in my life have also been the greatest things in my life. Okay? So they're the hardest and the greatest at the same time. And that the two hardest things I've ever done in my life was to be married, which I still am today, right? To my wife, we've been married almost 28 years. And to be a father.
Yeah.
Those things are not easy things.
Yeah.
Like like those are the two hardest things. And at the same time, the two hardest things that I've ever done in my life, and I still am doing, right? They're still hard.
Sure.
Are the two things that are the greatest things in my life.
Yeah.
And it is that place, that tension point where this thing that is so hard is the place where God is calling me to be the greatest, right? And to become the holiest in my life. And there's this friction point. So I don't know if you feel that way. Like, maybe marriage and fatherhood is just real easy for you. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, that's not the way it is at all. Like, no, 100% not. And if I said yes, I'm sure my wife would somehow figure out how to throw something through the wall and hit me in the head.
Lying.
She's like, yeah, get real. But honestly, like, sometimes I feel the easiest part of my life is just sharing Jesus with people, right? Like, and sometimes getting on here. Now, I mean, we, oftentimes have a lot of outtakes and things like that, trying to get things perfect. Right. But generally, it's very easy for me to say, okay, I'm going to show up here. I'm going to talk to people about Jesus. Like, doesn't mean I'm nervous. Doesn't mean, I still struggle in those things. But I agree with you. Like, a lot of times when I'm home, and I've been home since the Eucharistic Congress, like, I don't leave until the end of August, and we're here in the middle of August. And you enter back into the home and the family where it's really hard, where the rubber meets the road. Like, you can go out on a stage and tell people, hey, you need to be present. Right. Hey, you need to spend time with your kids and your wife. You need to choose them over yourself. But then when you get home and you actually enter into the home and your kid's like, hey, do you want to watch Hannah Montana? No, I freaking don't. Like, I don't at all. Like, I don't. That's the I'd rather, take a hammer to each one of my toes than watch that. But in that moment, are you going to say, like, am I going to practice what I preach? And you struggle in those things when your wife, like, I need things from you that aren't things that maybe you're comfortable with, or maybe they're, like, I need you to listen. My wife works at St. Jude. We were talking about this, and it's easy for me to talk about evangelization because she's also a Catholic. She understands the Catholic faith, and we can have an easy conversation. But sometimes she needs to talk to me about things I have no idea how to even begin to spell the word she's using. Yeah. And my mind starts to wander, and I start to, like, not pay attention or to quickly try to change the subject or to move when those are the things my wife wants the most. So yeah, dude, for me, like, it's easy on the road to go out there and speak to men and be there for men and pray and all those things. But that battlefield is really at home.
And when I say hard, doesn't mean it's not good. Okay. So what I mean is that the nature of our vocation, okay, the very nature of our vocation in marriage and in fatherhood is to help us to grow, to be better men, to become holier. Okay, yeah. So if you look out into the culture today, just the wide culture, not the Catholic culture, just in general the culture, the divorce rate's over 50%. Right?
Yep.
23% of men commit adultery, 22% women. Like, guys today are foregoing marriage. People are getting married later. There's a lot of things that just point in the opposite direction of marriage, right, and family, mainly because I would just say it's just because it's hard. Like, people are like, why would I do that? That's just very hard, right? Like, it's why? Because the nature of our vocation is that, we marry another imperfect person.
Sure.
And that imperfect person and my imperfections rub together, and God uses that to help us to become a saint, to become holy. Yeah. And so when I talk about it being hard, like, it is the hardest thing you'll ever do. The same thing is going to be the greatest legacy you'll ever have in your life. However, many people sort of quit before they get there, right? Yeah. They kind of say, well, I'm just going to have a mediocre marriage or mediocre relationship with my kids. This is as good as it gets. This is as great as it gets. Like, it's not going to get any better. Why? Because, man, I've experienced in my own marriage and fatherhood that everything in my marriage and everything in my role as a father reveals every weakness that I have in my life. Mm-hmm. Like, it just, all of it comes to the surface, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right? This is the nature of it, right? Like, your wife's going to look at you and be like, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you can't act that way.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Or you can go, and vice versa. Or, like, your kids are going to look at you and you're going to realize, like, what you said to them, or like how you wounded them by what you did or how you acted. All that begins to come to the surface, right? And we're face to face. Sort of what we've been talking about with this conference is we come face to face with our own brokenness and wounds in our vocation. And we do one or two things. We run from it, or we embrace it, and we actually do the hard thing, and we become the person that God wants us to be.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%, man. There's so much to talk about in all of this. I mean, because at the same time, like, you're talking about marriage and guys, like, not even giving it a chance or getting out of it quickly or getting married later. And I often tell people like marriage has become not an I do, but we'll see, right? It's not a covenant, it's a contract. Right?
Yeah, let's try it out.
Yeah.
Right.
And if I don't like you, and I remember like when this really hit me, because people will ask me like, what's one of the first things you realize in marriage, or what's one of the hardest things you like hits you first? And I'm like, how selfish you are. Just like because especially if you've been living like as you're called to, like separate, dwellings, and you're dating the right way and all those things, and then all of a sudden you're married and you're living with this person that you loved easily when you saw her like a couple nights a week or whatever, and now it's like, okay, I'm moving all your stuff out of this room and putting my stuff in here. And I remember one time specifically, it was like right after Angela and I got married, we're back from the honeymoon, and I'd always gone to this bar around the corner with buddies of mine, like old college buddies. Now this was also in the midst of all my struggles, but we had this like, we're going to show up, play Golden Tee golf for an hour and a half on Tuesday, and that's what we do.
Right.
So I started to head out the door. I was like, all right, I'll see you in a little bit. And she's like, where are you going? I said, I'm going to the bar to meet John and Matt and da-da-da-da-da. And she's like, why? And I said, because it's Tuesday. And she's like, not anymore. It's not Tuesday. And I said, yeah, it is. It's Tuesday on the calendar. And she's like, no, like we're married.
Right.
Like, I don't want you out at a bar. It's not that I don't trust you, but like, why don't you want to be with me?
Right.
I'm like, I want to be with you, but I also want to be with them. And it's this call out of like, there's a commitment and a change you've made in your life. And this is the struggle that a lot of men face is like, I want this, but I also still want to be and do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's never going to work in a marriage or in a relationship with your children.
Yeah. It's interesting because when we get married, like we're two individual people, Scripture says the two become one flesh. So we, we become one with the other person, yet we still have this individuality in that marriage. Like we're still unique. We still have a personality. We're still male, right? All those things stay, but yet we forego a lot of our freedoms for the sake of the better of the two, right? And that's really hard. Like I have to forgo some of the things that I feel like maybe are holding me in bondage, and yet when you actually embrace that, you're actually set free even more in your marriage, right? Like you hear all these things and all these things, all the old ball and chain, and all these things that are such a negative spin, derogatory. Why? Because the two haven't come together in sort of this deep mutuality of what's good for the other, right? So they hold on to their independence, and it's like two single people trying to just live as companions, instead of letting go of their life and embracing the new life together. Now, look, we say all that, but the reality is like every mistake, every wound, every thing that has been negative has come to the surface in my marriage.
Sure.
Like there's nothing that you can hide, right? Like always say this, like if you're going to get married, the best thing that you can do is take all your luggage and try to downsize it into a carry-on. Okay? Because you're not going to get rid of it all. But when you take that carry-on, you put it in the middle of the living room and your spouse unzips it and everything pops out. And you're like, oh, this and this and this, right?
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah.
And like you're like, either you're like, I don't want to talk about that, or it begins to reveal sort of this deeper, ability to look at your life and receive some deeper healing because of the nature of the relationship. So there's two things like in my life, like, and I'm sure, and you were talking about it, that have brought the greatest amount of healing, but have also at the same time revealed my greatest mistakes and wounds, and that's my role as a father and as a husband. Those two things, right? And I always say it's like a double punch. Like when you get married, things come to the surface. You're like, "Ooh, I thought that was gone," and then you become a father, and you're like, "Ooh, I didn't think I was like that."
Sure, yeah. And I even hear like a lot of times I hear my things that my father said to me and the way he spoke to me that I was like, I'll never speak to my kids like that. And I'll hear it. I'm like, and then I get so disgusted with myself. Like, dude, you literally, what that feels like. You know what that short temper made you feel like. This and that. And look what you just done. Like you promised never to do that. And then the devil gets in all that. And even like what you said with your wife, like, you're making the jokes about ball and chain. Like, well, there's truth in every joke, right? And so people say things like, ha, 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 I'm laughing it off. But there's resentment there. Like, there's some resentment in that of like, you've taken freedoms from me. But the thing is, when we go into marriage, we're supposed to offer ourselves willingly. And like, I want to give my life for yours. And you see so many men today that are, we talked about a little bit on the last episode that are like, losing themselves in video games and all these things, and they're lining up for days or hours in advance before the next Marvel Avengers movie comes out or whatever. And like, what are they looking for? They're looking for adventure. They're looking for sacrifice. They're looking for this heroic virtue and this way to live a life that makes them feel like I can be a hero. I can be something more. But so often as humans, like we look for these grandiose moments of that. But what God is offering us is that in our marriage every single day in these small moments. Yeah. It's hard to keep those goggles on all the time. Right. But like, it's like saying, I want to be patient. Lord, give me patience. And what does the Lord do? He gives you opportunities to be patient.
Right.
Right. And how many times do we fail those tests, right? Yeah. Like those pop quizzes or whatever. But yeah, like marriage, and especially with children too. I mean, I literally will say, like, I can't wait to get off this plane. Like, why did my plane get canceled? I can't wait to be home. I can't believe I'm going to miss a night with my kids. Yeah. And then I'll literally be in the house where they're like, hey, Dad, I want to talk to you for a second. I'm busy right now. Yeah. And the Lord's like, here's your kid. Right. And they love you, and you love them, and you said you want this. But why aren't you partaking in it?
Because it's hard, man.
It is hard.
Sometimes we just don't want to do hard things.
Yeah.
There's two things that come to mind. And look, we could do 100 shows on like the amount of like healing opportunities that marriage has done in my life. But like two that come to mind, like just like that, boom, boom, is Gretchen and I had gotten in an argument once, and I had come home from a trip, so we hadn't talked in a while, and we got in this argument. And we always agreed that we wouldn't leave, like we would, but I had to leave to bring one of my kids to a practice. Okay. So like we get in this argument, there's no resolution. So, and I'm like, I got to take so-and-so. And so I hop in the truck and drive them to practice. Yeah. And I'm driving home, and this thought popped in my mind. She's going to be gone when I get home. Now, she had never given me one reason in our marriage to believe that. But, my parents divorced. And when things got hard, like as hard as it got for them, like they left. Sure. Right. And that's their own story and whatever. But subconsciously, I never knew that lie was in the back of my head. Yeah. And I started crying on the way home, and I literally had convinced myself that when I drove up at home, she would be gone. Yeah. Like, talk about a lie, right?
Yeah, sure.
So marriage was bringing up this lie I didn't even know was there. And so when I got home, of course she hadn't left, and I looked at her, I was like, I thought you would be gone. And she looked at me like I was crazy. Yeah. And she looked at me and was like, I'm never going to leave you no matter what. And like, it just began to sort of rewire this lie inside of my head. And it was like this opportunity even to embrace that truth and that lie that was like happening, or just be like, I was joking. Like, I wouldn't really, like, I'm going to pretend like that never happened. Yeah. And it was a, like, I say that in jest, but like it led me down a path of like deep healing around abandonment, right? Yeah. And like authentic love that I had never experienced in my marriage, right? Yeah. And like our marriage started to get a little bit deeper the more that I became more vulnerable in those healing moments. The other one that came to mind was it was one Christmas, and because I grew up in a family who was divorced, like holidays were just kind of like different. They're all over the place, shoveled around from house to house and things like that. And my parents love me. I mean, I have a good relationship with them, but like the separation and the divorce, like, it just was. So I grew up just not really loving the holidays. So I get married though, like no kids. You're like, we kind of have the holiday. I can kind of hide during Christmas. Sure. And as we had kids, it was like, there's all this joy around Christmas, and subconsciously I'd be like, who has fun in Christmas? Yeah. Like, that's crazy. Why is everybody in my house joyful? This is silly. So I'd wake up, set up the gifts, and then I just kind of enter into the background, subconsciously, not even knowing this was happening. And by the third or fourth Christmas with kids, I don't know. I was being grumpy probably. I think I was. Not knowing I was. Yeah. Like all subconscious. And I know guys who are listening to this could probably relate in some way, shape, or form how you're making these subconscious decisions that you don't even know are there, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You and I talk about this, how St. Paul says, I do what I hate. I don't even know why I do it. Yeah, right? Sure. Yeah. So Gretchen looks at me and she goes, I don't know what's going on with you, but you have to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I wanted to do, and you talk about this too with your own vulnerability and your own story and your brokenness, is the first thing I wanted to do was blame her. I got to figure it out. This is your fault. Yeah. What about you? And I mean, I felt that coming. Sure. Like I was just going to point the finger. And like as it was coming, I was like, it just hit me. It was like, I mean, she's dead right. Like, there's no doubt. Like, this issue has nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
It's me. Man, and I sat in my chair. It was Christmas morning. And I just said, Lord, just show me why I'm like this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know. Man, all these memories from my childhood just started popping up. And, like, the face of Jesus was right in the middle of them.
Yeah.
And, dude, I mean, I'm talking about, like, I just wept. I mean, the presence of God, like, just in that moment of vulnerability, of receiving this sort of, like, this memory and the Lord's presence. I mean, it was like this moment, but without being married, that moment would have never happened.
Yeah.
Right? Or if I would have just cast the blame on her, I would have just pretended like, and I would have just kept acting that way for every holiday for the rest of my life, even though subconsciously I didn't want to be that way.
Sure. And that, I remember those kind of things in when I was struggling in my marriage. And I mean, Angel and I are not perfect by any means today. We all still have our tiffs and our tats and the places where we're still trying to give to one another and to give of ourselves. But yeah, I remember a lot of times always wanting to blame her, but knowing, like, deep down inside, like, dude, you're stealing money from your family. You're doing drugs all the time. You're basically half drunk most of the time, and you're blaming her. Like, the problems in your marriage are her. And I knew I had those issues.
It's so easy to do.
Yeah, it was. It's like, what's her problem? And I'm like over here snorting my 8th line and like drinking 10 beers and, smoking a pack of half cigarettes. And like, why doesn't she just lighten up and learn to live and relax? And it's just like, no, man, like, I knew the whole time there was a problem, but subconsciously, like you're saying, like, you just blame it on somebody else because it's easier.
Right. I'm not changing.
Yeah.
You need to accept me the way I am.
Right. And it's the same thing like we do as men in a lot of different things. Like, we would rather fight the battles that are out there than the ones in our own heart. And that's what marriage and fatherhood will point to quicker than anything, is your brokenness. Yeah. But then the devil will be in your ear going, you going to let them talk to you like that?
Right.
Like, do they not appreciate all you do for them?
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden you're going, yeah. And you're silently going, yeah, that's right. I don't deserve this. Blah.
Right.
And the next thing you know, what's happening? Your marriage is falling apart. Your relationship with your children is falling apart. And it's all because we're listening to these wrong voices and really failing a lot of the tests. And I don't want people to get depressed by that, but like, God has given us these opportunities again and again and again to grow and to heal. And then that's, dude, once you realize, as you and I were talking about that earlier, like, once you realize, like, okay, I made the right decision this time. Right. And I made the right decision next time. And there's a joy and a peace now in surrender, where so many men even hear the word surrender and it's like, no way. That is giving up everything. That is submission. That is that. And it's not what it is at all. Yeah. It's actually learning to live is what surrender invites you to.
Yeah. There's good news to all this.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's been no greater place that you and I have received authentic love than in our family.
Amen.
Okay. So like the flip side is, like, no one has loved me better than my wife and my kids, even in times where I felt like I didn't deserve it, that lie inside of me, right?
Yeah.
Or I even didn't deserve it, like, because I was just like, but, I would say my wife would say for the first 10 years of my marriage, she didn't really fully know who I was. Yeah. And I didn't even know that I was withholding emotionally from her. I think guys are slower to get to that vulnerability stage, but if we never get to that place of vulnerability, our marriage stays stuck. Like, we stay stuck in this relationship with our kids. Even I have adult kids now as well. Like, we have to move past that. I always say this line, like, my wife would look at me early on in our marriage, first 10 years, and she would say, I feel like you don't need me. And I would say back to her, like, check this out. I would say, well, I actually don't need you.
Oh, wow.
Like, I can take care of myself. Like, I love you and you love me, but, like, I don't need you. Like, if something happened to you or whatever, like, I can cook and I can clean and I can do my own clothes and I can go to work. Like, I don't need you. There was a lie in the back of my head that says, like, I'm self-sufficient. I can take care of myself. Like, when things got rough in my family, like, we just kind of fend for ourselves. We just took care
your
of
wounds
ourselves.
from your childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, a lot of that just taught me to be very independent, and, like, it got me to where I was. Like, so, there's a flip side to all, like, God helps us through it all. But I would say back to her, I really don't need you. And I didn't realize what I was saying. when I would say that. I was being very practical as a guy.
Sure.
Right?
But how much did that probably hurt for her?
And it wasn't until the day that I realized that I did need her. I needed her to love this person inside of me that was very hard for me to love.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember telling her that one day, and it was like we had a breakthrough.
Yeah.
I need you to love me. Like this little boy, this broken person, like just think about your story. And I'm so intrigued by like how well your wife was willing to love you when you were at your worst, man, in a prison cell.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like she had every excuse to be like, I'm not loving that guy.
Yeah. She'd leave, take everything. I mean, yeah, I've thought about that a million times. And, sometimes at the time it didn't, like after I got home and all those things, it didn't feel like love, because she was angry, she was hurt and everything else.
Yeah.
But she didn't leave.
Right.
She didn't leave. And like, I can't tell you how many people have come up to me at conferences and things like that. And they're like, you're lucky. My wife left me, like my wife, and I feel so sorry for that. But like in the midst of these things, you're right. Like women have this incredible ability to love, like no matter the circumstances. And I don't deserve any of that. And trust me, like times where I lose my temper, or I'm short, or I'm tired after 2 days of missionary work or ministry work and stuff. And I come home and I snap. And, in the moment, again, it's easy to try to justify yourself. But man, as soon as I get in a room by myself, I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like that, you should never have anything negative to say to that woman ever again, like in your life,
right,
for what she's done for you. And it's not like a submissive kind of thing. It's like you were shown a great mercy that she didn't have to show you.
Right.
That really God showed you through her.
Yeah.
And has helped you now to be more merciful in that way that you may not have been at the time. Like, and it's grown in our relationship and our marriage. It takes a lot of work though, and it's a constant reminder of what are we here for? We're not for each other. We're not here for ourselves.
Right.
We're here for each other.
Right.
And every day, like, sometimes I used to look at fights and go like, why do we keep fighting? And now I'll look at them like when we have these little tips, like the Lord's still trying to do something in me.
Yeah, it's revealing something.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And that's the good news of all this is like what comes to the surface is an opportunity for healing and growth and freedom in our life, right?
Yeah.
Instead of shoving it down. Dude, when we shove things down, it's going to come out of any hole,
everywhere,
any orifice we got. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, mainly in our heart. Our hearts become cold and hardened, and that's not what God wants. Your wife didn't leave because of grace, dude.
Right, yeah.
Right, like God gave her the grace to stay. So without God, like marriage makes zero sense.
Yep.
Staying makes zero sense. We're only in a contract. We're not in a covenant, because being a covenant takes a huge amount of grace to say, I'm going to love this person no matter what happens, right? And so like without grace, like I don't stay either.
Sure.
My wounds just say, hey, let's roll out, dude.
Yeah.
I'm going to be self-sufficient and on my own, and I don't need another person, right?
Yeah.
Like right? Like,
yeah, sure.
Like so, St. Ignatius has this just real quick line. He just says, do nothing without consulting God.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, a little tiff, a little, there's something, let me ask God about it.
Yeah.
Okay, God, like, let me consult you. Like, why did I get angry today about this? Like, why did my feelings get hurt? Or why did I withhold this? Like, let me just ask God. And I guarantee you, if you ask God to reveal, like, he will very gently show you why you do what you do and how you can get better.
Well, and what helped me too is I started to ask him very similarly. I would ask him like, Lord, like I would stop and I would imagine like God was in the room in the conversation. And like, this is his daughter, and how am I treating his daughter? And would he treat her that way? And that, and it just made me start to realize like, I need to look at her the way God looks at her, with this great love and this, in no matter the imperfections that I have, she has, whatever, we look past those, just like God looks past them in us, right? Like, I'm sure every day God's like, oh man, again, like, I can't believe you. Right. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to abandon you, but there are times of disappointment, right? And so I look at myself sometimes that way when I really, I mess something up or I go too far with something, or I just simply realize now more than I used to, like, dude, you're really being selfish. Like, this is nobody's problem but your own. Like, you want to be happy with your family. You don't want, moments like these, then the change has to take place in you.
Yeah.
And even with my kids, like I I would tell Angela, I was like, man, they tell you everything. They don't tell me anything. And she's like, well, John, I pick them up most of the time. I take them to school most of the time. I help them with their homework. Like, I know you're working and you're busy and stuff, but like, this is why they share these things with me. And so a while back, like, I just got the idea. I said, look, we don't have to spend a bunch of money or anything because we don't have a lot, but hey, kids, why don't like once a month y'all pick something you want to do with me? And so like the first month, Allison wanted to go to an escape room. And I didn't think we were ever going to get out of that place because I'm not very smart and she's 11. But like we did get out. Caitlin wanted to go to see a movie. Jacob wanted to go get ice cream. And like I made the time to go do those things. And what I saw happening was just like my children, it's not so much like we did something. What they saw was like, Dad wants to be with me. Mm-hmm. And Dad cares. Yeah. And Dad's listening. And Dad's present. And those things changed our relationship. It wasn't like we were ever like in a bad spot. I mean, I love my children, they love me, but like I was literally lamenting in rooms and in prayer in private, going like, my kids they're going to be gone in 5 years. They're going to be gone in 7 years. They're going to be gone in 3 years. And it's like, yeah, but they're here right now.
Yeah.
Like, and God's offering you that time right now. Like, stop thinking, because that's what the devil always wants us to do, right? Is to lament over the past and to fret the future, because God's in the present. And the moment that God gives us with our families in the present moment. And so often, like, that's one of his first lines of attack, is to try to get you to pull you all away from those things and those moments. Like, sometimes I remind myself, just go outside and sit with Angela and don't think about what you got to do in an hour. Don't think what you got to do in 20 minutes. Don't think about what you got to do tomorrow. Like, look at your wife in the eyes and tell her you love her. Hold her hand and sit there and just tell me about your day. Yeah. And there's probably some guy on the radio, on the car, about to have a wreck right now. Like, oh God, that sounds horrible.
Right.
But if you want a better relationship with those you love, you have to be willing to let the other parts of yourself die for the parts that want to grow.
Right. And this is unique to us as husbands and fathers, because there's certain characteristics that we take on that represent God.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
And one of the characteristics and virtues that God the Father has is that he pursues. Yeah. He's a pursuer of the people he loves, which is everyone, right? Mm-hmm. So even after the fall in Genesis, God goes looking.
He never stopped, yeah.
He goes looking. Jesus comes in search for us, the good shepherd. Well, for us as men, like, we take on that characteristic as a father and a husband in the fact that we are called to be pursuers of our wives and kids. I mean, if I say that, what is the opposite of that is where men struggle the most. When I talk to men when they're struggling in their marriage, they feel rejected, so they no longer pursue their wife or their kids, because their kids have said, oh, I hate you, or their wife has been hurt and has pulled away. And so the rejection is so deep for us as men that what ends up happening is we stop pursuing the people we're supposed to pursue the most. I remember when my oldest daughter is married now, and when she was first born, I was pushing her in a stroller. I was by myself. We were living in Phoenix, Arizona. And this random dude just walks up, looks in the stroller, is an older guy, and he goes, wow, I see you're raising a teenager. And I was like, excuse me? I was like, no, it's like 6 months.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me. He goes, it starts now. And he walked away. And I got home and I started thinking about what was that? Like, what was he talking about? And I remember thinking, is like a teenager just doesn't wake up one day as a teenager. Like, you raise a teenager when the kid is like born. Oh, like you're like depositing, these moments,
everything you do or don't
time,
do.
Right?
Yeah.
So I started doing these dates with my kids, throughout, so that when they were teenagers and they pulled away, that I had the ability to keep pursuing them when they stiff-armed me. Sure. Right? That's the characteristic that God wants for us as men, to push through the rejection, right? And to pursue. Yeah. Right? Like, when we see something that we want, guys, go get it. Yeah. Like, when we see a job, or we see something like we want to accomplish, or a hobby, we're like, I'm going to do that. Now, remember the day when you wanted to ask your wife out.
Oh, yeah.
And if she would, and you would walk up to her and she was like, no, I'm not going on a date with you. But you're in your mind, you're like, I'm going to marry that woman. Yeah. You just keep pursuing, right? Mm-hmm. So we push through this rejection from our kids even, and our wives, and we become pursuers of them. And on the back end of that is so much grace, so much purpose.
Yeah.
That these relationships begin to kind of take off in ways that we never thought they could.
Yeah, no, 100%. Whenever I get out of my own self, and whenever I really am like, I want to do things to make Angela happy. I want to do things to make my kids feel loved, and go out of my way to do those things and continue to make that a priority in my life. You're 100% right, man. Like, it just, things change, and the tone changes, and the smile changes. It's like the things that, it's so crazy, because it is the definition of crazy, doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Right.
We think, no, I'll just keep living the way I want. And then one day my wife is magically going to be like, I love you, and I want to kiss you, and I want to take you to bed, and I want to make you your favorite meal every hour of the day. And I want to, and that's never going to happen. Like, think about it. And the funny thing is, we think we get so deep into our own thoughts and what we want, the way we want it. Like, we never go like, if my wife was treating me the way that that I'm treating her, would I want like to do any of those things with her? Like, no, because again, I would feel not loved. I would feel not important. I would feel second to many other things.
Yeah.
But we still expect, like, okay, we'll get over that, right?
Yeah.
And continue to just, be what I need you to be. When in fact, what we need to be saying is, how can I be what you need me to be? And that's the call of Christ, right? Is pick up your cross and follow me. Lay down your life and follow me, right? Like, husbands, lay down your life for your wives, like Christ laid down his for the church, like that's St. Paul. This is what he's saying, and it's not a metaphor. It's not a novel idea. Mm-hmm. It's the key to happiness, right? Is to simply say, and to realize, like, I'm pursuing happiness by my own means, by my own desires, my own wants of what I probably don't even really want inside, but I've been told by society, the world, the devil, whatever, this will make me happy. But instead, it's this vulnerability, it's this humility, it's this surrender to what God wants and to what your wife needs and what your children need. Then you're like, at the end of the day, I don't need anything else.
Right.
Right? Like, I don't need that $250,000 a year job, because I have a family that loves me and I love them, and it's about that. Like, I don't think I've told you this since you've been here, but I tell people all the time, like, dude, I love to go do the Lord's work, but the minute I'm in that airport, I'm already ready to be home.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, I want to be home, because that's where my heart is now. And I missed, like, you want to get real. I mean, dude, I missed, the first freaking 6 years of my son's life. And I missed the first 3 years of my little girl's life. And then I spent several years after that angry and hurt and confused. And I'll never get that time back, right? And that's hard to live with, right? That's hard to live with. But God even then is saying, like, yeah, that didn't go well. Mm-hmm. But what are you going to do today?
Yeah.
What are you going to do right now?
Right.
Like, I'm inviting you to more.
I think that word is so powerful, though, man, because, like, here's the other characteristic of God, right, is that God speaks truth.
Yeah.
Okay? So in areas of our life where we've failed, God is so loving and grace-filled that he's willing to speak truth into those lies that we believe and to show his love.
Which is someone who loves you or willing to tell you the truth.
Right. So if someone's listening, or you have a story like you and I, and there's been, mistakes you've made in your marriage, or you regret the time lost with your kids, a lot of times guys stop pursuing because they say it's too late, or the damage is done, or they'll never forgive me. And if God's characteristic is that he can go to his kids and speak truth, and to his loved ones and speak truth, then that characteristic is true for us, that we can go to those people and speak truth. Hey, honey, I am so sorry for the times that I have hurt you, and I have just dug my heels in and haven't changed. I want to get better. Hey, son or daughter, like, I missed some time, but like, I want to make that time up. I'm sorry. Like, it's never too late.
Yeah.
Like that's like, that is very true. And if we take on that virtue of pursuing and entering into speaking truth to the lies that we believe, or the things that we've done wrong to the people who love us the most, dude, I'm telling you, to the very last breath you take, God can redo anything. Yeah. Right? Like, so any man out there is like sitting in regret, or like it's too late, or I've been rejected, or I've done so many things wrong. Dude, man, no way, man. Yeah. Like, because like your greatest legacy is this vocation. Yeah. And so to your very last breath, you have an opportunity to love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to love well. And that's the thing. What I've come to find out is, like I've said, I went on a fraternist thing with Jason and all those guys with Jacob one time. And, we were like, slaughtering a pig and doing all that stuff and shooting guns and all that cool stuff. But one of the nights it was like, you're going to sit here and say something to your son, that you think they might want to hear. And I didn't even know what I was going to say. Here I'm a speaker and all this stuff, and like usually have no loss for words. And I'm like, what am I going to say? And so all these dads are like just opening up, and everyday guys just pouring out their soul. And Jacob was sitting across the fire. Like he wasn't even sitting by me. He was sitting, and it wasn't because he was angry or anything. He just sat over there. And I started to speak to him, and it was getting dark and could barely see him, but I just started to speak from the heart. And I started to tell him, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I wasn't always treated the best by my father. And I'm not trying to make excuses, but whether I like it or not, some of those tendencies have rubbed off on me, and I'm short with you, and I treat you ways that I thought I would never treat my son, and I say things, and I don't give you the time, and I'm short with you, and I just, that's never the relationship I wanted to have with you. And I just started like crying and saying this stuff, and like these people are probably like, this guy's like an evangelist. He's over here like sounds like the worst dad in the world. And next thing you know, I just see the silhouette coming around the fire. And Jacob just dove into my arms, and he whispered in my ears, I didn't think you knew. I didn't think you knew. And he said, Dad, I love you and I forgive you. And it was one of the most powerful moments I've had in my life since things changed. Was just one, the love and the forgiveness of God I saw through my son. His willingness to go like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think you knew. Like I just thought, it was just something. He was constantly forgiving me in his life, and just thought like he doesn't know any better. He's going to continue to be like this.
He has such compassion for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It just proves what you're saying is like God doesn't want broken families. He doesn't want distance. He doesn't want division. He doesn't want divides. He wants us to be whole, because that's the greatest sign of his love in the world.
And he doesn't want us to be perfect.
Yeah,
that's the
Amen.
lie from the pit of hell. Is that you're trying to create this perfect family, right? That looks great on the outside, and we get these perfect job and house, and like it just is like like
Facebook pictures,
But like this idea that there is perfection in a marriage and in fatherhood is a lie.
Yeah,
like where we get to the place where it becomes fruitful is when we embrace our imperfection and our brokenness and become vulnerable, because there's deep intimacy with our spouse and our kids in that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because then there's love and mercy and forgiveness and joy. Like you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's where like it becomes fruitful, because the whole nature of it, as we talked at the beginning, is not about perfection. It's not even about happiness. It's about holiness. It's about becoming whole.
Yeah.
Right? And so in our greatest moments of vulnerability, I am so sorry. Like our kids are so easy to forgive and love and have compassion for our spouse,
Yeah. And that's something I always make sure to do now too, is when we're like, I used to be the king of I'm sorry, like 3 seconds, I'm sorry. And it's like, you didn't even think about that. You just said, I'm sorry. Cause
your wife ever looked at you, but well, why?
Yeah, exactly. And you're just trying to like make it better. And Angela and I are totally two different. Like she needs to like go to Target for an hour and a half. Like I can walk out of a room, look at the TV and walk back and go, hey, I'm sorry for that. Like I didn't, but what I started to realize was my I'm sorry's, and I didn't mean that. So we're falling on deaf ears because I was so quick to offer that. Yeah. And even my children knew, like, Dad's just saying this to get over it, to make himself feel better.
Let's just move on.
Right. And so I started really being more intentional about like, okay, you feel bad and you want to feel better. It's like sometimes what we can do in confession. Like you do something and you're not really looking to amend your life. You're looking for a cheap car wash. I just want to feel better, feel dirty, and I don't want to feel dirty anymore. And so that's how sometimes we can receive our wives and kids. And when we've done something wrong, we're just like you said, you want to shrug it off and like, let's just think about something else. But what I started to do was go and sit. I have a little prayer station in my room, and I'm like, all right, I know all you want to do is go out there so you feel better. But like sit with God, like sit here and listen to the Father.
Just ask him.
Yeah, and ask him like you were talking about. And what did I do? Like, why do I keep doing this? Why do I like? I don't want to just. I'm tired of just throwing out I'm sorry's I don't mean. Yeah. Like I want you to take me to this place so that I can actually apologize, not say I'm sorry, like, but apologize and ask for forgiveness. And there's a difference between saying I'm sorry and will you please forgive me. Yeah. right? That's a different humble ask. Like I'm at your mercy to forgive, right? I can't make you do that. And I would love to have your forgiveness because I understand what I've done wrong. And I want to come to you and make things right.
Yeah.
Versus I'm sorry, just get it, and that was something that really helped me in our marriage.
Yeah, so as we're planning this conference and spending time together, one of the main themes around healing, but around healing around our understanding as a husband and father. I think part of doing this show is just to encourage men in their vocation.
Yeah.
Not only don't give up, but to know that God's got more.
Yeah.
And that through the hardness and the hard work, like God's got freedom and purpose and healing in your marriage and father, and it's never too late. Like
never,
it's all in front of you. And so, I think we're saying this because we're just sitting in it as witnesses to the day to day. Like we're not like, hey, we got no, we're just really trying to enter into the hard, right? So that we can, have, the marriage and family that God wants, and it is through the hard that there's fruit.
Yeah.
Not like rejecting it. And we were really just want to encourage men in that work.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the thing. Like we've been given a gift, right? You and I didn't figure all this out on our own.
No, heck no.
Somebody else helped us. I mean, just one person that both of us, Dr. Bob, I mean, I love that man. And I know you do too. But Bob, I remember I called him one time because Angela and I things were going well. And I don't remember what happened, but something went sideways. And it got really kind of nasty, just like, and I was at the point of like, it's never going to get better. Like, when is it ever going to get better? And so I called him. I'm like, Bob, I feel like such a hypocrite and I don't know how to, fix this. And I'm so sick of this. And of course, Bob was like, well, if you'll buy the plane ticket, we got an unveil this week and come. And we couldn't go. It was like $1,000 a plane ticket and all this stuff. But I said, Bob, I feel like a hypocrite. I just like all I do is tell men how to fix things or how to be better and all stuff, and I can't do it myself. And I'll never forget. He said to me, John, try being a marriage counselor for 33 years and being on the verge of divorce for most of that time. And he's given me permission to share that. I mean, he's written about it in his books.
Yeah.
But it really spoke to me. I'm like, man, this guy, he's written all these books that are helping so many people, but he still struggles too.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing. And what we've always tried to do in this ministry and on the show is to present ourselves as what we are, broken human beings, right? Who understand there's redemption, that understand there's hope, there's grace, there's mercy, there's a better life. But we also understand that it takes a lot of work, and it takes what really being a man is. Being a man is willing to do the hard things, is willing to take the hard knocks, to go through things so that your wife and your children don't have to. Right? I'm willing, and that's back to the Marvel thing, the hero stuff, like that diving on the grenade, like the Captain America movie, right? You got this skinny guy and all these muscle-bound guys doing thousands of push-ups, and the guy throws a grenade in the middle of them, and only one of them jumped on it. And that was a scrawny kid that wouldn't have gotten in the military. Right? It wasn't that soldier serum or anything else that made him special. It was the type of person that he became. Right? And so that's the goal for all of us, is God longs for us to be these great stewards of our marriage, to be these great protectors of our family, and to play the role. I mean, like, what a gift it even is to share the name Father, right, with the Father. And it's a gift and it's a privilege. And God doesn't expect perfection. He knows that we can't do it.
Right.
That's the thing. And it's like, no, God wants me to be perfect. God knows you're not perfect.
Right.
He made you broken, and he still chose to make you. What does that tell you? What he thinks about it? But he's there to help us through all these things, Paul. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do in this ministry, and why I mentioned Dr. Bob and all of that is someone has done something for us. Christ has done something through Bob and other people in our lives that we couldn't do for ourselves. And so how can we be a gift is to try to pass on what we've learned, but also to admit to people that, like, we still struggle too.
Yeah, and look, with our wounds and our sin, our trauma, there's two ways to go. Either we repeat it.
Yeah.
And it becomes a generational curse and sin.
Yep.
Or we have it redeemed.
Yep.
Right? And one of the characteristics of Jesus, he's got many, but is that he boldly and courageously took on the beam of the cross and broke the generational curse of sin.
Mm-hmm.
He took it upon his shoulders.
Yeah.
And he gave his life. Okay?
Yeah.
And for us as men, like, one of the greatest things that we can do, one of the most heroic things, is to take on the sin and the trauma and the generational curses that have been handed on to us and give them to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And let him redeem them and break them so that we don't pass that on to the next generation of our own children and our families and our marriage.
Yeah.
But we don't do it ourselves. We just give God permission to take it.
Yeah.
And redeem it, and that's the beauty of it. So the work is His. We're just have to surrender to that.
Right. And we got to be clay in the hands of the potter, man. Like, that's it. It's just like, Lord, have your way with me. And Paul, I mean, that's something that we're going to be helping men do from now on together in these men's healing conferences. The first one starting in November the 14th and 16th at Ann Arbor at Christ the King, as we mentioned on the previous time we were together. Registration's there on the JP2 Healing Center website. So you can go to JP2, which is II. It's not the number 2. It's jpiihealingcenter.org. Go to events, and you can find Restored there. We're going to do the first one there, and then we're going to have many more, I imagine, because people know they need healing. Men are more open to it now more than ever. But, folks, I just want to invite you, whether you're able to make it to one of those events or not, like whatever we've talked about here today and what Paul has shared in our own stories, like I hope it inspires you to really take a good look at your life and to sit down and if there's struggles in your marriage, to start thinking about it. Where's your responsibility in it? Where are you contributing to the issues in your marriage? If there's issues with your children, to look at it from the other side of the equation, from the other side of the person, from the other person, right? That's how we become a gift. When we stop thinking of ourselves and we start to offer ourselves back to the other and looking at things from another perspective besides our own. So, Paul, as we close here, I just want to give you an opportunity to any final thoughts you got and to share more about where people can find you and your work.
Yeah, I mean, easy to find me, just paulgeorge.la.
Yeah.
And then that'll link to like our ministry stuff and website, The Art of Living, things like that. But really, honestly, it's just been great journeying with you and having these conversations. This conversation, it happened off air.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Like, so we're just inviting other guys into it. And that's the encouragement, is for all the men out there to realize that you're not alone, like to embrace the life that God has right for you right now, and that tomorrow's better than today if you just move forward with Him. And He'll bring the peace and the joy and the healing and the purpose and the grace, everything that you need. But it does take us embracing, the reality of it and the hard work.
Yeah.
And that's the encouragement for all the men out there.
Amen. Well, guys, now it's time to practice, right? Now you take it, you pray with it wherever you are, stop. If you're in the gym, the lawnmower, in the car, pull over, cut the lawnmower off, put down the weights, and just say a quick prayer to God to come further into your life and to help you see these blind spots, these places of wounding, these places of that you need healing, and invite Him into it for the good of yourself, for the family, and for the world. God bless you guys. Thanks, Paul.
Amen.